So the headline statistic was that 47% of the working population actually live within 5 miles of work. So essentially, if you were to take the Office of National Statistics and extrapolate that upwards, that's nearly 14.5 million people who could be cycling to work every day.
Why do you think they're not, then?
I think that there is a perception of risk which actually is misplaced. So it is sad to see these stories of people in fatalities, especially in London, and especially over the last few weeks. But actually, statistically speaking, you are more likely to come a cropper whilst exercising in the gym on a rowing machine or spending an hour in the garden. So really, there is still this perception that cycling is much more risky than it actually is.
But I guess with both those activities, the risk is created by yourself rather than when you're on the road on a bike. The risk on the whole comes from people you can't control, be it buses, cars, pedestrians.
Yeah, so there is a piece here which is essentially about respect and about education. So when it comes to the cycling side of things, we expect really that there should be bikeability as part of the national curriculum so that we can learn to cycle in the same way that we learn to swim whilst we're growing up. And then the flip side is, maybe, for example, with the HGV drivers, that there is this driver awareness courses that people can actually take up. And in fact, there are some examples of that already happening. And really, it's just a question of making these best practice examples the norm.
Now, you talk about the fatalities, but also that it's actually at the lowest level since records began. So if we look at London, 432 cyclists were seriously injured or killed on the roads last year, which is, as I say, the lowest. It's still too many, though.
Well, one is infinitely too many, isn't it? Which is why I think it's so important that we take very seriously the education side of this and the respect element as well within shared use. And then if we look to some of our European neighbours, of course, we nip to our Dutch friends and say, well, why is it that there are so many people cycling of all ages and of all genders compared with London and the national picture as well? And essentially it's to do with prescribed and assumed liability. So the flip side for the Dutch is that if there is a collision with another road user, and that's a driver, the assumption before any investigation is that the driver is at fault. And what that means is, in respect of England, is potentially that people would take cyclists in a slightly more cautious approach when they're overtaking.
Is that something you'd like to see happen then in the UK?
Absolutely, yeah, very much so.
And in terms of the statistic you came up with, that almost half of us live within 5 miles of where we work, what would the difference be if those people did get on the bikes?
So it's huge. I suppose first and foremost, if we were to invest like we are expecting in London, around about £10 per head in cycling infrastructure, then the return back in savings is 5-fold. If you compare that with roads, it's double for roads, but this is 5 times more returns on investment through cycling infrastructure. So if we were to take 14.5 million people and put them onto the bikes, then the congestion drops, the burdens on the NHS drop, and people find themselves in work with fewer days off sick.
OK, well, David Murray, thank you so much for coming in this lunchtime.
Thank you.